Alright, time for another DraftPhysics.com video presentation. Alright, so first a little bit of an update, and then we'll go on to a Professor Lewin video and really just talk about physics, the whole subject, and, the philosophy of it. The idea that this just logically putting together facts, and conventional physics says things that are just illogical. I mean, some of them are just really very poor. So anyway, I did make a couple of videos. Now there's one of them is on the Huygens Optics channel, response video, just a 10-minute, one of these shorter videos. So if you want to just, change of subject to photons. So I will make that public eventually. It's on YouTube, but it's not a listed video. So that'll just pop up if you're doing the subscription thing. But anyway, I'll post a link to it below. And in the next day or two, I'll make it public. Just trying to encourage, again, conversation, which you can't do with anyone. And it's just disappointing that there's so little out there. I mean, I guess I'm the only person making daily physics videos, that's not talking about UFOs or debunking flat earthers or some other crap. But anyway, yeah, well, sync looks off, but I'm not going to worry too much about it. So I made a couple of videos just sort of on the subject of, there's a huge hypocrisy in terms of what is considered to be evidence. So, it's just so obvious. I mean, the fact that whatever they are, the bullshit scientists, the Naked Emperors forum, would consider Stephen Bro's video, some sort of credible evidence when everything about it is wrongly headed. I mean, it's bad physics, just overtly. Not very well thought out experiments. I mean, if I produce such a video, and then it's got all the crap on it, all the music and the porn and all the rest of the crap he threw in it, the absolute garbage. I mean, if I made such a video, I would be incredible. Okay, nobody would think me a credible person on the internet making arguments about physics. But yet, the same people, okay, when it's for their purpose, when it's their cop, it's okay. It's just such hypocrisy, and it's just so obvious and so illogical, and has nothing to do with anybody doing anything called science or giving a shit about the truth. And you're just outed. Okay, so it's just, wow. It just shows how poor the reasoning skills of the average human are. And it's just very disappointing, depressing, irritating, but doesn't change the facts, so they'll have to deal with the facts as they are. That I'm not really talking with other minds capable of doing anything called consistent logic. That they're really just all religious kooks. Still, unfortunately. So, Professor Lewin. So we're going to play it. I'll play the whole video. It's only 5 minutes. I should be able to get through it without too much difficulty. The only thing worth anything really is the end, okay, in terms of a couple of the statements he makes. They're just so... you're just saying, I wish it were so, Professor Lewin. I wish you understood what the word concept even means, because frankly, you're not even close to doing physics by concept rather than physics by math. Your obsession seems to be derive an equation, make it a piece of dogma, and don't ever consider the fact that one equation might conflict with another. Again, doing the basics of the rules of logic, which are if there's a contradiction, you have a problem. You have to fix that. And you don't fix it. You just keep spouting this duality crap, and it's, so you have wave-particle duality, and now you have the entanglement duality, actually. Your trialogy, you have all kinds of explanations, all the way going to reaching for multiverses. And then you have the dark matter, antimatter dualities. It's It just goes on, and then you have this silly energy duality. Oh, momentum's a thing, but it's not a thing because this kinetic energy stuff is the magical, real stuff. The new modern energy. It's just too silly. I mean, it's overtly too silly. They're obviously conflicting descriptions of exactly the same thing, and you're all pretending, oh, that's not a problem. Two different answers to the same question? Oh, it's no problem. So this sort of just gets to the whole idea of how they define work and how they define motion in the universe, and they're not even getting anywhere close to a clue.
Oh, hello. Solution to problem 131.
All right, so apparently the problem is you're just dragging some weight. Okay, you're carrying some weight, and it's in the form of, say, a branch. And so part of it can sit on the ground. The light part, the fluffy part, or the heavy, trunky part. And if you're carrying the heavy, trunky part, then you're carrying the heavy part, and then if you're pulling on the light part, then the heavy part's digging a hole, a trench in the ground. Blah, 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 which is easier, blah, blah, blah. So he doesn't really answer the question because, frankly, he doesn't even deal with the facts. He pretends that holding 10 pounds in your hand is not doing work. Physics says it's not work. Well, physics is obviously broken if that's what it's saying. It's obviously pretty stupid if it's saying holding 10 pounds isn't doing any work. Now, if you're holding it with a stick that goes right into the ground, then you're not doing any work, right? You're not holding it. But if you're holding it with your armature, okay, then this is what you're doing, okay? You're not actually holding it against gravity. You're undulating it in gravity, and that's a lot of work.
If the mass of the branch is m, and you have to move it over a vertical distance h, which is 20 meters.
A vertical distance. I think you mean horizontal distance, but whatever.
Then the energy that it takes to move it over that distance is mgh. That's non-negotiable.
Okay, so more of this non-negotiable crapola. Okay, so you're going to move it up a hill. All right. But of course it's negotiable because it depends on how much time you take to move it. So if you take a very long time, you're doing more work because you'll be in the gravity more time pulling it against the gravity. So it is negotiable to make an argument that the faster you can get it up that 20 meters, the less gravity you'll endure, the less work you will do. Theoretically. As a practical reality, you can shoot something, fire it even further than the 20 meters, and that 20 meters of work will be less work. Each 20 meters becomes less and less work the more 20 meters you add and the more velocity you add to get to that point. So there's lots to negotiate about the efficiency with which you accomplish the task. And again, the point I'm making is what's clearly going to happen as you're lifting something is you can not be lifting it. That is, you can be oscillating it. So the whole time you're carrying it and you're moving it up, you're doing this. And all of this is work. So unless you can do this really efficiently, just some sort of idea where it just moves in one direction and you don't do any oscillating, well, then you'll have minimized the amount of work. But if you're doing any oscillating, any vacillating, then you're doing work, more work. Any movement is work. Gravity's working, the earth is working, pushing things back. It's all work because it all consumes a force, uses a force.
That's always there. However, if one part of the branch is on the ground and is dragged slowly up to the 20 meters, then there is friction with the ground.
Right, and now it becomes huge in terms of what if you're going up around the mountain. So you're going up a 20-foot rise, but you're doing it the longest road possible. Then you're dragging meters of banging into the ground pushing it back up, you banging into the ground pushing it back up. And every time you're banging into the ground, you're losing energy. And a portion of that energy is in the direction you're moving. So you keep adding more work to the process.
That means you have to overcome that friction.
All right, so let's understand. Friction is not something you have to overcome. Friction is losing your money. It's a hole in your pants. Okay, you have $10 worth of quarters. You put them in your pocket. Friction is the quarters falling out of a hole in your pocket. And so the amount of friction is just the rate that you're losing your energy. You're trying to go this way. You're hitting a bump. When you hit the bump, okay, this happens, all right, you lose this portion of energy because you made something else move. When you make something else move, you give away your energy. So this goes directly to the third law again, which I've already talked about, and I'll probably have to talk about over and over again, where the idea is okay, all right, for every action there's an opposite reaction. Really not what's happening. When you give away your money, you instantly get poorer. You don't need a force to make you poorer. You already did it by giving your money away. So yes, you made somebody else richer. That's the action you're paying attention to. So that's what we call the action. The reaction is you're now poorer. Well, that was the same action. The action where you gave it away, the action where you moved something in the ground, that action has to be accounted for. And if it has a component in the direction you're going, then that's what you did. You gave away your this way energy. And now instead of $10, you got $9.75. And each time you bump into the ground and move a piece of it in the direction you're moving, you gave away another quarter and you have less and less energy. So then if you want to keep your momentum, you want to keep your velocity, then you have to add more fuel. You have to put more, hey, I only have $5 left in my pocket. I'll take $5 out of my other pocket and put it in that pocket. You have to consume some other amount of force or energy. You have to resupply. And so it's real work. It's real energy. But it's like they don't even get this concept at all, that all movement has to be accounted for. All the movement, any movement is using energy. It's doing work. Had to come from something. Didn't come from nowhere, came from somewhere. It was caused. It did consume heat, energy, however you want to think about it, a thermal condition. You had to use it. Doing your process instead of doing some other process, instead of doing something else in the universe, it's doing what you're doing. You're using it.
We call the frictional force Fr.
Yes, and again, it's not a force. Friction's not a force. Friction is you losing your energy by moving other matter. That's all it is. You lose your money when you give it away.
And you move all the way a distance d, which could be a mile, then the energy that you have to produce in addition to mgh is the frictional force times d.
Right, and the frictional force over a mile could be gigantic in terms of how many times you banged into the ground and how many times your calories had to burn to refill your pocket so you could lose some more quarters. So you could use up $1 million, right, to do an amount of work that should have only cost 75 cents. So theoretically, your fight against gravity was 75 cents. The fight against you keep moving the ground, well, that's $1 million.
Now, what is the frictional force? Go back to my 8-1 lectures.
Why? You're calling it the frictional force when it's really not a force. The frictional force is you making other pieces of matter move. It's not a force against you. It's a force you're giving away.
It is the friction coefficient, we call that mu, times the normal
Yeah, blah, 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 blah.
force.
So gravity obviously produces the contact we have with things, and the contact is down, okay, and we don't have anything to do with that until we change the contact into down and forward, or down in something else. So as soon as it's not just gravity doing something, but we're adding some other motion, it's the added motion that we're giving away. So again, when you're holding something, you say, okay, it's just gravity. Gravity goes right through me, into my feet, into the ground. That would be nice if that's how it works. So if you put it on top of your head, then it goes right through your skeletal structure, which is really rigid. And so you're not going to burn any calories because the energy really efficiently goes through a bunch of hard bones and into the ground. You don't do this. But if you sit there and with your bent elbow and your musculature and you hold something heavy, guess what? You're not holding it. You're not rigidly sending the energy into the ground. Before it goes into the ground, you're doing this constantly. So constantly it wins, pushes you down, pushes the weight down, and your body has to manifest the energy to push it up back against it. And the only way you can do that, of course, is to send energy into the ground.
The normal force is the force from the road up on the branch.
Right, so there's no force up from to the branch, right? So it's just kind of silly to talk about some force up on the branch when no, that's just the fact that the ground, okay, isn't permeable. You can't just push into the ground. You got to hit atoms to go into the ground, and those are the atoms that you're going to consume energy. So it's not some force you're fighting against. It's the fact that the atoms you're going to hit, okay, when you move them down, they're eventually going to push back up.
Where it touches the ground. That normal force is way higher when you have that heavy part of the branch on the ground.
Right, so there's three ways you could do it. You can hold the whole branch, okay, so let's say it's 10 kilograms. So you could just hold the whole thing off the ground. Now you're at least not giving away any energy to the ground. So you're not moving any of the ground to hold the branch, the minimum amount, okay, because it's the energy isn't bang, 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 okay, it's just holding it, and so it's wobbling. That's the only catch. So there's the two ways. You can have the light end on the ground, so it's moving very few earth atoms, all right, or you could have the heavy end dragging on the ground. Now it's moving a lot of earth atoms, okay, so those two are a question. But the third option is just not to be touching the ground at all except with your feet, and you hold all of the mass. But now you're oscillating a larger mass in your own musculature. So now it's just about how much time you're spending doing this. Because every time you have to push back up, you have to supply that. It doesn't come directly from the ground. It comes indirectly from you giving away, more quarters to maintain its place in gravity. You're maintaining the difference between it being on the ground and it being up here. You're maintaining that difference.
Therefore, you have to do way more work to overcome.
So it's funny, he's got an uneven pendulum over here, right? Does he think kinetic energy is deciding the question of where these little balls fly? Or does he think momentum is controlling where the little balls are flying? That there is higher velocities and slower velocities, and that it's really momentum on one side is the same as the momentum on the other side.
That friction than if the very low mass part of the branch were on the ground.
So again, the key thing is they take no account for you holding something. They don't think you're doing any work, because they just don't account for the fact that you have to make up the differential between this and the ground. That amount of gravity is your responsibility. Your body has to find some way to do that, and every way you do that, you can do it very inefficiently or very efficiently. So you can wobble a lot or you can wobble very little. You can make your body more rigid and create a faster path for the obligation to hold it And the less, the more you extend your arm, and the more leverage you create, the more wobble, the more energy you can consume. So you can consume various amounts of energy depending on what position you hold it in and what you're using, what kind of pulleys and whatnot in your structure to push it against the gravity, push back against the gravity.
So even though it may be very uncomfortable to drag the heavy part in your hands, to hold the heavy part in your hand, and to drag the very light part of the branch on the road, it may be very uncomfortable. Energetically, from a work point of view, the way we define work in physics, the best way is indeed to have the heavy part in your hand.
Right, because they don't count it. They're not counting the actual calories you're actually using to hold the heavy part, okay, in your hands. They're just saying, no, that's we're just pretending that energy consumption doesn't exist. And so, and they're saying that's our physics. And you're saying, well, isn't that conceptually incomplete? I mean, isn't it just pretending that events that are happening, you're just pretending those events aren't happening? You have taken a mass and lifted it up against gravity. You're holding it some distance from the ground. The heavy end is now 5 feet in the air, 4 feet in the air. The light end is now dragging on the ground. Well, there's a huge differential in the amount of energy just in the fact that you're in these different gravitational potentials. So clearly you've got to be using more energy holding the heavier part up, and yet he's saying we don't count that. I mean, that's not complete physics in my opinion. It's not even close to being complete. That's not reasonable. That should be just taught and part of the classes. Well, here's the physics we haven't finished yet, and we're just completely left unfinished. And so we're going to say something silly like you're not doing any extra work, when obviously you're doing some extra work.
Reduce friction. Now some of you will say, when I have a heavy object in my hand and just stand still, and I hold that heavy object in my hand for half an hour.
Right, and so it says it right here in the text. If you hold 10 kilograms in your hand for 5 hours, you will be exhausted, but you have done no work. I mean, why would, I'm just saying, on its face, the physics is stupid. That's a stupid thing to say. It's illogical. It's nonsense. It's proven every day to be absolute nonsense. We know that I got exhausted because I used calories, because I did work. So your work equation is completely freaking wrong and broken if it can't even identify something that's such obvious work. And you just leave it that way. Well, we're just going to say stuff that's basically irrational and illogical, and we're going to say that somehow there's a good reason to be irrational and illogical. It's clearly at minimum so uncooked as a physics diagram, so raw and crude and unfinished and incomplete, and that should be at least the minimum statement. Oh, we just haven't worked this out yet. Some kind of statement, but to pretend it's good physics, no, it's stupid.
I get very, very, very tired. I agree with you. But from a physics point of view...
It can't be from a physics point of view then. Physics is wrong. If physics doesn't account for the use of my energy, then it's not getting it. It's missing something. I'm clearly burning calories. I'm clearly doing work. So why are you pretending I have good physics when it doesn't acknowledge that? The house is on fire. It's burning down. Physics says, no, it's not really burning down because our equation doesn't say it's burning down. I mean, it's stupid.
You have done no work because you could put that heavy part on the table.
Yeah, the fact that you could do it some other way where the ground does the work instead of you doing the work because you don't create any sloppiness in how it's held. I mean, it's really just about sloppiness. It's just that our body is not made to create these nice clean pathways to take the weight and push it into the ground. So the inefficiency of the path we're taking. So it's just like you have the choice to go around and around in circles before you get up that 20 feet. Just as you can draw a straighter path, make a straighter path up the 20-foot hill, the body can do the same thing. It can have a very straight path put on top of my head through my spine, or it can have a very, very long, tedious, wrong kind of path that means I do a lot more moving of the objects up and down.
You would agree with me that the table does no work. The table cannot get tired.
Yeah, the fact that the table doesn't get tired doesn't mean that the table doesn't do work. So we know that the fibers in the table do work, and that over time the table can crush. We know that everything, the glass in the window is sinking. Okay, there is work being done on the glass molecules. All right, it just isn't very obvious. All right, but it's theoretically happening to the molecules of the glass. And the fact is it's not pushing back, so you'll see it over time. You'll see the work done. But if something's capable of pushing back, if something's capable of maintaining, of both, producing both effects, then it's capable of doing work that'll be quite invisible, but you can know theoretically it's there.
But that's a separate issue. So the answer to 131 is, from a energy point of view, from a work point of view, by far the best would be to hold the heavy part of the branch in your hand and to let the very light part hit the ground.
Right, and it has no reasoning to it, because it's completely denying that there's work in carrying the heavier part. So the answer really isn't to your best advantage to pay any attention to, because physics isn't being very smart. It's giving you a really stupid answer. Because the fact is it's all not true. I just changed the circumstances a little bit, and it's to your advantage to be pulling the branch rather than lifting the branch. So I just changed the circumstance a little bit. I reduce the surface. I make the surface harder, so you're moving less molecules. I reduce the friction, and you're better off pulling, okay, because you didn't have to do any lifting.
That minimizes the friction, and therefore it minimizes your energy. Many of you have this right.
So he's talking about right and wrong in a context where the physics doesn't even have a clue. It has so simplistically and in such an underdeveloped way defined the concept of work. It's not even close to getting right answers, because it doesn't even acknowledge all the ways work can be done. Anytime there's oscillation, there's work being done. Okay, going this way and going that way and going this way and going that way. Well, because I always end up here as an average, doesn't mean I didn't do any work. I'm clearly moving molecules that way. Stuff is happening in the universe that way because I move molecules that way, and then I push it down this way, and there's obviously moving stuff that way. It all has a repercussion. It's all energy that's going to keep moving through the system. It's all a form of heat being shot in the different directions. And it's that very idea that's just totally lost on physics. The idea that when an electron moves, okay, this is what it's doing in the universe. When it changes its position, it's either reflecting very little or it's reflecting a lot. So every time an electron moves in the universe, it's completely changing the pattern, okay, that the universe is going to see from that location in space. It's either going to see a bunch of stuff coming at it, a bunch of photons flying at it, billions and billions, or one or two. That concept, physics doesn't even have a clue. It's not even close to the realization that that's what's going on in the universe. There's just masses. The masses have to be hit by energy. The energy, as the mass moves, gets pushed in different directions. Not even close. No clue at all. So he talks about 40% getting it right, when getting it right by a completely stupid, non-connected to actual reality standard of we only count how much you moved against gravity. We don't count how efficiently you did it, by what path you took. We don't care about any of that stuff, and we're just going to, all we care about is this. That's it. We don't care about anything to do with how, and how is a huge part of the question.
I would say 40% of you have it right. Many of you argue about centers of mass, and they use all kinds of heavy language. It has nothing to do with that.
Well, it has a lot to do with it, so it's just stupid to say it doesn't have anything to do with it. In the real world, it does. In your fake little phony world, you're pretending that the fact that you have more mass higher in gravity, they're not paying attention to a piece of the equation that's kind of important, in the sense that If this is the heavy end and you have the heavy end higher while you're transporting something, clearly that has an implication.
All what matters is, what is the friction? That is what you have to overcome.
And you can't calculate that either, so it just doesn't even, that would be silly to even ask a question. Well, what's the friction? Well, you're going to get an answer that who knows. It could be 2, it could be 2002, depending on what you're dragging it on.
And the friction is proportional to the normal force. And
it's not proportional to, it's, again, the amount of friction for any 1 millisecond is proportional to that. But not the friction over the question of how'd you get 20 meters higher. So if you go straight up and you don't incur any dragging forces, or you don't give away anything to the ground because you never touched the ground, you just jumped straight up, then you could argue it's proportional to the normal force. But as soon as you're moving sideways, it's no longer proportional to any normal force, because the normal force isn't a per second force.
the story. The larger the normal force, the larger the friction. That's all. It's a very simple problem.
All right, so again, it doesn't make any sense to say it's a very simple problem when the variables are incredibly important and create completely different freaking answers. So nothing simple about it at all, unless you, again, just convert it into, I have a mass of 20 and I'm going to straight up launch it to 20 feet. You know, if you make the equation that simple, well, then you can say, ideally, this is how much work it would take, you know, just to fight the gravity. But clearly, the story you're telling has roads in it. It's right there in your title. You know, that's not the same story.
But what counts is that you accept the fact that physics is not about equations.
Okay, so then he says something totally ridiculous where, you know, 90% of physics lectures are mathematics, formula derivatives. And then, as I've shown, then you do some little fake experiments now and then where you try to force the experiments to match your mathematical interpretation of reality. And it just can be clearly shown that mv squared was a religious idea shoved in the middle of physics and just rationalized over the last 200 years. Just create excuses to keep it, even though you have zero evidence of it. And then you've created this idiotic notion that somehow momentum, there's such a thing as negative momentum, that I can move something, I can do work on something this way, and then I can do work on something that way, and somehow I didn't do any work. Another too silly an idea.
It's about concepts.
Ah, there you go. And what concept has any logic connected to it at all? So you have bent space. What the hell is that? How does an electron detect the bent geodesic? How does it motivate the electron to move? So a non-force, okay, somehow moving electrons and protons in gravity. Well, that's a good concept. You know, and then you have a work equation where you don't count all the movements. You only count the ones that, you know, you decide which ones matter. Even, again, the third law, you have kind of a right idea that the universe requires this in it for that to exist. You can't create a bias. I can't make a school of fish go this way unless I create another school, so to speak, another group of fish going that way. I have to pull out, take the evenness that's in the universe, and I have to make unevenness, to make this section of something go that way. I have to take 10 of something going this way, and I have to put it over there. It has to have its own reality. So yeah, for every this way, I had to release that way. No other way to do it. There's no other way to make something move in a biased direction unless you first have to create the bias. And to create the bias, you have to create the other side. You have to create the opposite bias. To have a school of fish going this way, there has to be a school of fish somewhere going that way. You can't even get that concept. I mean, your physics is conceptually vacuous, and it's just entirely mathematical gimmicks. So you sit there and make this statement, it's about concepts. Where's the evidence of that? You don't have any rational concepts. Everything's a figment force. You have waves and floaty things and all kinds of crap that it has no relation to any kind of solid concept. You don't even get this. You think the inverse square law is some kind of mysterious function when no, it's a function of anything circular, including our eyeball. All right, my hand doesn't really get smaller, okay? That's perceptual. All right, in the real nuclear universe, an electron can still see another electron a billion light years away. It still sees it as an electron. It doesn't see it as, oh, it's just a little tiny thing billions of light years away. That's not how it sees. You don't even get that concept. That we have this perverse perception of the universe because we're looking at it through a little tiny hole. We're not looking at it even. We're not face to face, like two hands face to face. I move them apart. This hand, okay, is not now, seeing this hand differently in any other respect than if you say it's seeing more of the universe. So the further away they get, they see more of the rest of the universe. You don't see less of the hand.
We'll be friends. That's always a given.
We'll be friends, right, until I call you a flat earther for disagreeing with me. So, we're friends until I'll insult you because you disagreed with me. Blah, 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 blah. So, that's all just a little bit too insincere and trite also. But regardless, whatever, it's about the truth, and it should be about the physics, and people who sit there and say they love physics, and they think science is great, and all that kind of crap, they really should have some integrity and admit when, oh, it sounds like a religion today. That part of physics, no, that sounds like religion. That doesn't sound like science. And again, if they took, Professor Lewin must know some of the history of Leibniz. He must know that the silly clay experiments really weren't up to snuff. That the equation they proved 200 years ago, the one they proved, they were convinced by the evidence, was an equation that got answers that were 50% off. You could argue 100% off. The answer was 100, and the right answer, by modern standards, is 50. Clearly the answers were way off. And this is when it was proven to be the right answer, is when it was getting answers that were insanely off. Way the hell off. All of that, forget it. We don't pay any attention to those facts and recognize that maybe there's something wrong with this dopey theory. So again, I've shown his own lecture where he does the experiment twice. He doesn't really intend to do it twice, but he does the same experiment twice. The first time on purpose, trying to show how the equation gets right answers, all right, and he gets one answer where we have no conservation of momentum, where we make more momentum in this direction and we have more momentum in that direction. We get 65%. Well, we get an extra we get an extra 2/3 free momentum out of the experiment. We create free momentum, essentially a free energy experiment, easily convertible into a perpetual motion device. And then the second time he does the experiment by accident, all right, he wants the two objects to stick to each other. They don't, they bounce instead. We get completely different answers where momentum is completely conserved, where 100 momentum's in, 100 momentum's out, 30 this way, 70 this way. No concept of cancellation, no idea that it's a vector quantity and therefore I can cancel this way against this way, and I can pretend I didn't do any work. I can pretend that energy isn't heat and that I can somehow create heat that opposes each other. Opposing heat that cancels. It's conceptually, trivially stupid. It's trivially stupid, okay, to use his own kind of rhetoric. It's non-negotiably dumb. And I won't get anything. as a counter argument, except insults from people. Yeah, so whatever. See if there's anything else. But yes, being friendly is very nice. I'm all for it. I'm not the one holding grudges. I'm not the one feeding the fires. Alright, so I guess that's enough. Seems like enough. I don't know if we need to add anything else. So I'm putting it on YouTube because it is a courtesy to the people I'm responding to. But we'll call it an update video. And such. So I did go through, just to throw it in there as some future thing, working on the simulation, blah, 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 blah. Should have something soon. But I went through Descartes, his principles of motion. And it's just so funny because they're paraphrased. It's hard to get the actual, what Descartes actually wrote. It's hard to get these. I mean, it's 300-year-old stuff, and there's no translations. There's no anything that's pure that you can get online anyway, right? It's all in somebody's book. You got to buy a book. But it's really kind of annoying. But yeah, it's all these paraphrases, and they all do these critiquing like there's some sort of wrong answer, but they don't show where there's a wrong answer. Where using Descartes' logic, you would get the wrong answer. They don't show that to actually be a fact, which is kind of funny. Funny in a horrific kind of way, that's their good science. Just slander Descartes. Screw it. We don't have to actually defeat him. Yeah. It's pathetic is what it is. Alright, so that seems like enough of a video now. I think so. Yeah. Alright, so we can get rid of that. And I can get out of here too, and that'll be the end of the video. Yeah, we'll just do that. I guess I could leave. Well, I can't do that. I could do that. I could go this way. Ooh, then I have to leave that way. Yeah, so I don't have as much. Yeah, see, I'm already out of the. I'm already out of the video. So that doesn't work quite as well. I probably should have gone out through the middle. I could have gone this way out. Yeah, well, doesn't really matter. I mean, the point is the video's over, and that's the end. And that's all, folks. Blah 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 blah. Stuff. Blah. Yeah. It's over. The end. Yep.